Thomas Massie put FBI Director Kash Patel on the spot with live questions about Jeffrey Epstein, and what unfolded next caught everyone in the room completely off guard. From the very first moment, with a single question, the atmosphere inside the hearing shifted noticeably. No one expected Massie to begin by directly referencing a series of names long linked to years of rumors, intelligence chatter, and unexplained relationships surrounding Epstein. Yet the real surprise wasn't the names themselves. It was Patel's answer, or more precisely, his inability to provide a clear and confident response. "Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent," Massie said. The chairman recognized him immediately. Massie then explained that he had 4 documents he wanted entered into the official record. The first document detailed Jeffrey Epstein's story, a saga that had played out publicly for years. It included a quote from Esta stating, "I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone." The second document was titled, "What Epstein's Bodyguard Warned About His CIA Connections." The third came from Fox Digital. Headlined, "Epstein's Private Calendar Reveals Planned Meetings with Obama Administration Official, CIA Chief." The final document was a Wall Street Journal report highlighting 36 meetings between Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel and the former head of Israeli military intelligence, with no objections raised. The chairman allowed the documents into the record. After a brief pause, the gentleman from Maryland was recognized and submitted one additional unanimous consent request. This document was Judge Engelmeyer's August decision in U.S. v. Epstein, which stated that the government possessed more than 100,000 pages of Epstein-related files, far exceeding the roughly 70 pages of grand jury materials that had been publicly referenced. With no objection, the chairman then returned the floor to the gentleman from Kentucky for 5 minutes. Massie thanked the chairman and addressed Director Patel directly. He referenced Patel's Senate testimony from the previous day, when Senator John Kennedy had asked whether Epstein trafficked women to anyone besides himself. According to the official transcript, Patel had responded that there was no credible evidence Epstein trafficked victims to others. Patel also stated during that hearing, and again in the current session, that the investigation had been limited by narrow search warrants from 2006 to 2007 and by a non-prosecution agreement that restricted future cases. Massie pushed back hard on that explanation. He clarified that those limitations applied only to the Southern District of Florida. They did not apply to the Southern District of New York, which handled the 2019 federal sex trafficking indictment. That case produced extensive evidence, including multiple FD 302 FBI interview reports. According to victims who cooperated with the FBI, those documents now in FBI possession identify at least 20 men Epstein allegedly trafficked women to. Massie continued by naming one of those individuals, Jess Staley, the former CEO of Barclays Bank. He noted that the victims included minors, such as Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who has since passed away. He emphasized that the list does not stop there. It reportedly includes at least 19 additional individuals. Among them, a Hollywood producer worth hundreds of millions of dollars, a royal prince, and a powerful figure within the music industry, Massie continued, listing the scope of what the FBI already has in its possession. He referenced one extremely prominent banker, a senior government official, a well-known former politician, the owner of a major car company in Italy, a famous rock star, a well-known magician, and at least 6 billionaires, one of them from Canada. Massie made it clear that while he personally did not know all of their identities, the FBI does. These names exist inside FBI files that fall under Patel's authority. He then asked the question directly, had any investigations been launched into any of these individuals? And had Patel personally reviewed the FD 302 interview documents tied to these allegations? Patel responded that he had instructed FBI agents to conduct a full review of the entire Epstein case file. He said he asked them to identify any credible information and report it back. According to Patel, the FBI is working with Congress to disclose relevant materials and produce information when appropriate. He added that if any credible evidence emerges that warrants new investigations, those cases would move forward. However, he stated that no new material had been brought to him that justified opening a fresh indictment. Massie pressed further, asking whether the issue was a loophole in the system, or whether Patel was suggesting that the victims themselves were not credible. He questioned whether the FD 302 documents failed to establish probable cause. Patel pushed back, saying that was not his personal opinion. He said 2 different U.S. attorneys' offices, across 3 separate administrations, had reviewed the same materials over many years. According to Patel, those offices examined the FBI's 302 documents and reached the same conclusions. Massie followed up directly. Had Patel personally reviewed the 302 documents in which victims named the individuals who abused them? Patel admitted that he personally had not reviewed every document, though the FBI as an institution had. That prompted Massie to challenge him sharply, asking how he could testify before the Senate and claim there were no names. When at least one name had already been mentioned publicly, Patel clarified that the FBI and the Department of Justice do not release victims' names or unverified information. He emphasized that protecting victims is standard policy and that only credible, substantiated evidence is considered for public disclosure. He reiterated that multiple authorities had already reviewed the full scope of available material. Massie then shifted the conversation. He asked Patel whether he had been present at the Attorney General's White House event where binders of Epstein-related documents were released to social media influencers. Patel confirmed that he was present. Massie then asked a pointed question. If officials were willing to meet with influencers who stood to gain attention from these tragic stories, would Patel also be willing to meet with the victims themselves? Patel replied that the FBI is always willing to meet with anyone who brings forward new information. Massie pressed again, asking whether Patel personally would meet with the victims. Patel responded that FBI professionals handling the cases would conduct those meetings. Massie then asked whether Patel had been instructed to release documents to the Oversight Committee on the same day. Massie introduced his discharge petition to force the release of Epstein files. Patel said he was not aware of the timing. Massie pointed out that the documents were released that same day and that some victims' names had not been properly redacted due to the rush. He added that the victims were unhappy about that outcome. Finally, Massie raised the issue of intelligence agencies. He asked whether Patel had investigated any potential CIA connections to Epstein, whether he had seen a CIA file on Epstein, and whether such a file would be shared if he requested it. Patel responded that he could only speak for the FBI and said that his agency had reviewed everything provided through interagency channels. Massie closed by asking whether Patel would be willing to review a CIA file on Epstein if one existed. Patel responded that if such a file exists and has not already been shared with the FBI, the Bureau would examine it like any other new investigative lead. Massie then shifted topics and asked whether there had been any progress in the January 6th pipe bomb investigation. Patel said that investigation remains ongoing and confirmed that progress has been made. Massie followed up with another long-standing question, asking whether any progress had been made in determining the motive behind the Las Vegas mass shooting. Patel answered that he would need to follow up on that issue. Massie thanked him, yielded back his time, and the chairman acknowledged the yield. Immediately after, the gentleman from New York requested unanimous consent to introduce an unsigned memorandum dated July 7, 2025. The document stated that investigators did not uncover evidence sufficient to justify opening investigations against uncharged third parties. It carried the official insignia of both the Department of Justice and the FBI, with no objections raised. The memorandum was entered into the record. That moment of silence that followed is exactly why the exchange ignited such intense reaction online. Massie's move was not about theatrics or political performance. It was something much more uncommon in Washington, a direct effort to test whether the institutions tasked with uncovering the truth had fully done their work. And almost instantly, it became clear to viewers that the answer was far more complicated than a straightforward confirmation or denial. This is why the moment landed so heavily. It didn't reveal a lack of evidence, it revealed a lack of clarity. And once that uncertainty was exposed, it could not be easily dismissed or ignored. The hearing had crossed a line where carefully phrased answers no longer felt sufficient. Massie's approach was methodical. He began by placing 4 documents into the official record. None of them made definitive accusations or claimed proven wrongdoing. Instead, they consisted of news reports, past investigations, and widely circulated accounts. What tied them together was a consistent theme, powerful figures, intelligence agencies, and a story that has never fully settled despite years of public attention. He cited reports discussing alleged intelligence ties, articles outlining meetings between Epstein and influential officials, and long-standing reporting that has fueled debate for more than a decade. But those documents were never meant to be the main event. They were groundwork. The real question came next. Had the current FBI Director, the person now responsible for oversight, personally reviewed everything the Bureau possesses related to Jeffrey Epstein? The answer did not come as a clean yes or a clear no. Instead, it hovered in a gray area. That hesitation alone changed the tone of the room. Patel once again pointed to past limitations, explaining that earlier investigations were restricted by narrow search warrants issued in the mid-2000s and by a controversial non-prosecution agreement in Florida. That agreement is well known and has been debated for years. Most people understand that it constrained the early case. What Massie emphasized, however, is what often goes unspoken. Those limits applied only to Florida. They did not apply to New York. They did not apply to the 2019 federal investigation. And they did not apply to the massive volume of documents collected after those restrictions were no longer in effect. That distinction is where the FD 302 documents become critical. These are official FBI interview summaries, records of what witnesses and victims told investigators. They are rarely discussed outside legal circles, yet they are foundational to understanding what the government actually knows. And it is here, at this intersection of documentation and accountability, that the questions only grew louder. These are not rumors, not internet theories, and not speculation pulled from online forums. FD 302s are formal records created by FBI agents, documenting exactly what witnesses and victims reported during official interviews. They do not prove guilt, and they do not automatically lead to charges. What they do show is what was alleged when it was reported, and how seriously those statements were treated by investigators at the time, according to victims, who cooperated with federal agents during the 2019 investigation. These interview summaries reference approximately 20 men, some publicly known, others still unnamed, whom Epstein allegedly trafficked victims to. Once again, these are allegations, not verdicts. They are recorded statements, not convictions. But the key point is that they exist, and they remain part of the FBI's records. This is where the hearing shifted in a noticeable way. Massie asked Patel a direct and simple question. Had he personally reviewed these documents? Patel's answer was no. He explained that the FBI as an institution had reviewed them, that prosecutors had examined them, and that officials across multiple administrations had evaluated the material. But he himself, the current director of the FBI, had not personally reviewed all of those records. That admission mattered, not because it suggested a hidden conclusion, but because it revealed how distant and fragmented responsibility has become. Over more than 20 years, this case has passed through numerous agencies, offices, and administrations. And when responsibility is spread that widely, accountability becomes harder to pinpoint. Decisions begin to feel abstract. The public is told that someone reviewed the files, but never who, when, or by what standard. Massie was not attempting to validate a theory or accuse anyone of wrongdoing. He was questioning the process itself. How can a case truly be closed if no single leader has reviewed the full record? How can the public trust the outcome when the official answering questions can only point to unnamed predecessors and past reviews? That is what made this exchange different from every other moment in the hearing, but Massie didn't stop there. He shifted to something more personal, something often overlooked in discussions like this: the victims. He drew a sharp contrast that landed harder than any reference to billionaires or intelligence agencies. He noted that the Department of Justice had coordinated a public-facing document release with social media influencers. Yet many Epstein survivors continue to struggle for direct communication, clarity, or even basic consistency in how their information is handled when documents were released in haste. Some victims' names were not properly redacted. That failure wasn't just a technical oversight. For the survivors, it was deeply personal. It reinforced a long-standing belief that they are being treated as elements of a media rollout rather than as individuals who endured real trauma. That moment shifted the tone of the hearing because it wasn't about politics or speculation. It was about whether survivors were being treated with the care and respect they deserve. And that is why viewers said the room suddenly felt different. Then came the most uncomfortable question of the exchange. Had the FBI investigated any possible CIA connections? Had Patel seen a CIA file on Jeffrey Epstein? For decades, quiet whispers about intelligence ties have circulated in the background of this case, never fully addressed, never fully resolved. Nothing was proven. Nothing was declared as fact. There were no definitive conclusions, only unresolved questions that have lingered for years. And Massie never claimed otherwise. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't push a theory. He simply asked whether the FBI director himself had ever reviewed any intelligence-related files connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Patel's response was carefully worded. He said that if such a file exists, and if it has not already been shared with the FBI, then the Bureau would review it. That phrase, "if such a file exists," immediately stood out. Not because it confirmed anything, but because it left the door open. It didn't shut the question down. And that is what continues to fuel public curiosity. It's not the presence of evidence that drives concern. It's the lack of clear, final answers. People don't keep asking questions because they want spectacle. They ask because closure never fully arrived. And when closure is missing, uncertainty fills the space. Over time, that uncertainty turns into doubt. Massie then pivoted to two unrelated but equally unresolved cases: the January 6th pipe bomb investigation and the motive behind the Las Vegas mass shooting. Patel's responses were short, cautious, and incomplete. That was not unexpected, but it reinforced the broader feeling that several major questions remain unanswered. By the time Massie concluded his remarks, it was clear that the real takeaway wasn't about the names mentioned earlier. It wasn't about a specific allegation. It wasn't about intelligence agencies, billionaires, or foreign officials. The real headline was uncertainty itself. Here is a system that has had access to tens of thousands of pages of material for years, yet still cannot provide a clear, unified explanation of what was reviewed, who reviewed it, and why certain investigative paths were ultimately closed. That does not automatically mean wrongdoing occurred, but it does mean trust remains fragile. And fragile trust is enough to keep a story alive, because the truth is something most people never hear clearly explained. Transparency does not mean dumping stacks of documents online. Transparency means explaining decisions in a way ordinary people can understand clearly, consistently, and completely. Until that happens, the questions will continue to return. Not because people are obsessed, but because the story never reached a true ending. Not because everyone believes in hidden secrets, but because the answers have never felt whole. That is why this hearing spread so quickly. Not because it was political, not because it fed theories, but because it showed one elected official asking the simplest question possible and discovering that the simplest question can be the hardest one to answer. If this breakdown helped you see what was really happening beneath the surface, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives like this. And if you want more clear, fact-based breakdowns of hearings, investigations, and moments the headlines often overlook. Share this video with others.